Short-form coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic, Taylor Rick, Shanali Bassick in for Caroline Hyde. Counting you down to the closing bell on this Tuesday afternoon. Here to help take us beyond the bell, it's our global simulcast partners, Carol Masser and Tim Stenovic, bringing together our Bloomberg Television, Radio, and I'm told YouTube audiences. Carol, a rebound day here. S&P 500 up a solid 2% on the day. The outperformer, though, the NASDAQ Composite up almost 3%.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the major U.S. equity averages, I'm also watching the NASDAQ Golden Dragon China Index because that's up about 4.3% just off its highs of the days. But nonetheless, it seems like China is easing a little bit, concerned about growth, making sure that there are some policies in place. And we are seeing some of those Chinese stocks after a lot of uncertainty over the past few months. Certainly investors, Tim, finding them interesting again.
We saw just a little bit of a tick lower, especially when it came to some of the individual names when it comes to reopening, like airlines, for example, cruise companies that were positive until late in the afternoon when we saw a headline about the Pfizer vaccine's efficacy about the Omicron variant. A lot of those shares are now lower on the day today.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of good news today. We have that news about the debt ceiling as well coming out of Washington. The idea that it very well might be staved off into next year. And, that Pfizer news, as you were talking about, too. We're very close to record highs on the S&P, but, that was even before these headlines came to fore.
And it's so funny when we think about the intersection of Fed and D.C. and Fed policy, and then, of course, the virus. It was two big notable investment banks, UBS and Barclays, saying that those two even together are not enough to sort of derail the recovery and where we are on sort of this equity liftoff kind of day, Romaine.
All right, closing bells here on this Tuesday afternoon. An update here for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, up about 1.4%. The S&P 500 up about 2% here. Looks like it's going to close right around 46.86 here. That record high is 47.04 and a half from a couple of weeks ago here. It's still, this is going to be the best day we've seen on the S&P, I believe going back to March. We'll double check that for you, though. The NASDAQ definitely having its best days in March. And I think this is interesting. This is actually the biggest outperformance we've seen by the NASDAQ Composite versus S&P 500 since at least March 31st. Up 3% here on the day, 461 points, 15,686. As far as those small cap cyclicals, well, they got in on the party as well. The Russell 2000 higher on the day by about 2.3%, 2253, Carol, and change right now is your closing number on the Russell.
Yeah, and the NASDAQ can send a thank you card to the chip stocks because, man, they have definitely been an outperformer. I mean, take NVIDIA, the top in the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, which overall was up, 5% on the day today. NVIDIA making up 5.2% of the NASDAQ 100. So that explains to some extent some of the outperformance in a big way, Taylor, when it looks at the tech players, those chip stocks really pushing stocks higher.
So let's go there. Let's do that for our radio audience as we do every day, the sector winners and the sector losers. It is all green on the screen except for one tiny loser at the bottom. Let's start with the gainers because, Carol, you really sort of nailed it on the head there, right? How much of this is some of the semiconductor equipment, auto components, technology, software? Am I sensing a theme here? You're up 2.6 to more than 5% for some of those sectors on the day in the S&P. The only loser at the bottom is some of the telecom services. And, Rain, you've been talking here about some of the slowing growth with a few of those down in the red off about 0.4%. Of 1%, Carol.
All right, I'm going to stay with the tech theme here, if I may, and Chinese, kind of melding them together. Alibaba, this one was at its highs up about 4.7% today. By the close, up about 1.4%. But earlier throughout the session, having its best day since about 2017, leading rebound among those Chinese tech stocks in particular, really those bargain hunters piling in after Beijing's move to really bolster the economy. There's also news of a fresh CFO at Alibaba, and also the company's core commerce division, a little bit of a shakeup there, and that definitely caught investor attention. Citi also coming out saying the developments as positive, reiterating their buy on the stock with a price target of $234 a share. Stock right now at $125 and change. So talk about some optimism there. Another Chinese company.
We should point out, just sorry to interrupt, Pinduoduo. That's your biggest mover in the NASDAQ 100 today.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so really a lot of momentum there. Another Chinese company, I'm not sure I'm going to say it, so maybe one of you guys can help me out. Pinduoduo.
Yeah, Pinduoduo. I just said that.
Oh,
yeah.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You don't have to pay attention to me.
Okay, I won't. It's up 12.5% in today's session, pretty much closing at its highs. It too was top in the NASDAQ 100. I always listen to you, Romaine. Among the 27 U.S. listed Chinese companies that could apply for secondary listings in Hong Kong, according to Goldman Sachs. So they have been focusing on those companies in particular. And then Marvell Technology, also top in the NASDAQ 100, up about 7% here, announcing that it will ship its 5 billionth hard disk drive controller next month, rated new outperform at KGI Securities, a price target of 105, stock closing at about 91.
And I'm just going to add a couple to that board. Just we should flag Apple did close at a record high today, up 3.5%. Nvidia up 8% here on the day. Tesla also getting a nice bid, up 4%, Tim.
Yeah, Apple. Thank you, Katie Huberty at Morgan Stanley, for that note early this morning. Let's talk about decliners. Gave you a little preview of these earlier in the day, but because they are the top percentage decliners in the S&P 500, worth checking in right now. Comcast lower by 5.29%, leading cable stocks lower as well. Charter down by 3.3%. The story there is concerns about broadband subscriber growth. We heard that from a Comcast executive early today at a UBS conference. Rivian, I want to check in on this one, finishing the day down by 0.5 percentage point. Interestingly enough, yesterday shares of Rivian ripped higher by more than 11% after a handful of analysts came out in a really positive way, saying that, hey, Rivian really can compete with Tesla. So wanted to check in today, down just about 0.5 percentage point, guys.
Let's take a look at yields, because when we talk about some of the big tech gainers on the day, typically, you guys, that comes with yields falling. But what was so interesting is you actually had sort of a similar rate of change kind of day, at least on the short end. Yields are up 5 basis points to 69. And Carol, I was joking earlier with Romaine that we started this year at 10 basis points. So we're now up to about 69. So you're pricing in effectively 60 basis points of moves on the front end. And you had a decent 3-year bond auction today. I rounded out back up finally to a 180 on the 30-year and a 10-year to 147. But it's so interesting, Carol, and I'll sort of kick this off with where we're going, is sort of what that means for these longer-term growth and inflation expectations. It was our 3 o'clock guest, Anwita, who said, be careful. This may not be all technical. This could be fundamental if we're thinking about maybe a Fed that is tackling inflation out on the horizon.
Well, and this is what we're going to get some clarity on next week, right? Our focus, and I feel like you guys, we're going to be counting down to that Fed meeting next week, and you'll maybe see some markets calming down ahead of that, awaiting to see what Jay Powell will say. We just had on Ken Van Leeuwen, who runs his own company, a wealth management firm, and he said, I'm like, any surprises? And he said, if Jay Powell comes out and talks about being a little hotter when it comes to interest rate increases, he doesn't necessarily expect it, but that would be something that would certainly get market attention. We'll see whether Jay Powell plays it safe, Tim, or whether he's more aggressive potentially.
Well, earlier than that, we're going to get inflation data on Friday. I know it's not the preferred measure of inflation that the Fed actually uses, but I wonder, Romaine, how that changes the story. If we do say the hottest read in years, which we could see, even excluding
it changes
excluding
the story.
oil.
Look, anyone who's dismissing this number, even to talk about it from a transitory perspective, I think is a little disingenuous. When you start talking about 6.8, we should point out 6.8 right now is the average of economists' estimates for the most recent month here. You start talking about some of the biggest year-over-year increases that we've seen in inflation going back to the early 80s, late 70s here, even without the extra bid from energy that we saw back in the 70s. But when you consider the slowdown or the potential slowdown in economic growth, a lot of folks have to start to say, how do you reprice? How do you revalue?
Yeah, how do you price? How do you change your portfolios with those kinds of expectations ahead of you? You have a lot of people slamming on the bond market today, and the impact this will have on their bond portfolios. Where do you go instead?
Where do you go? You go into NFTs?
Yeah, well, that's a case that somebody makes.
Go into NFTs. Just ask the folks at Christie's and Sotheby's, man. Those NFTs selling for what? Millions of dollars. So Tim, you wonder, where is a safe place at this point?
You're pretty tapped into that, Carol, right?
Yeah, totally. I've got a couple of NFTs. Would you like?
Why?
Art is a hard asset.
I believe in art. I want to hang something on my wall.
We can hang an iPad with an NFT on your wall, Carol.
It's not the same.
No, it's not the same. It was interesting, though, today, I got to bring in crypto here because even though it was a risk-on day, we didn't see big moves, at least to the upside for Bitcoin. Still trading just around $50,000.
Yeah, but look, you talk about the big crash, flash crash that we had over the weekend. The idea that you saw that sort of floor come back into this is what a lot of the crypto faithful have talked about here. You're going to have that volatility. It's basically built for volatility, but as long as you can start to feel out a floor for when these prices drop here, that gives some encouragement to some of these folks who want to remain.
I'm just not sure I want that volatility in my salary. I think we're going to have that conversation later.
Your salary?
Salary.
Oh, salary.
Yeah, great story on the Bloomberg.
You get paid, don't you, Carol?
Your retirement.
You're doing this just in NFT.
I just do this because I like. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we got to run. That's going to do it for our cross-platform coverage. Our market wrap on this Tuesday with Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV. Catch us again, same time, same place tomorrow.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
I do feel like we're going to get to a point, and thanks to our TV colleagues, Taylor Shinali and Romaine there, because I do think we're going to get to a point. Yeah, that inflation report is important that we're going to get in terms of CPI. And I know I'm always like, it's not the favorite.
But
the thing is, we know inflation's high.
Right, the 6.8% is the number that we're expecting to see. At least that's according to the economists surveyed by Bloomberg. Significantly lower when we take a look at excluding fuel and excluding energy and food. That's expected to come in at a 4.9%.
I always find it interesting because it's like, yeah, let's back out food and energy. I don't know about you, but I got to feed my family and I got to fill up the gas tank.
Yeah, I do too.
I always love that. It's like, back it out.
And it doesn't.
But I understand because it can.
And look, we should, food and energy, filling up your gas tank is only part of the energy story here.
Correct.
Right?
Heating your home. Gas to cook food.
But the cost of actually getting those goods to you,
right.
The goods and services to you. If everyone's paying more for getting those goods to you, then you're going to be paying more in return.
We talk about Fed meetings being so important. This is going to be an important one because we're going to have to see how Jay Powell, a lot of the data points did not take into the Omicron variant. And maybe it shouldn't because as we're seeing so far,
we know how to live.
Right, we know how to get through it. And so far it looks like maybe it won't be as bad as some of the other variants. But
still waiting on more data.
That FOMC meeting is going to be an important one in terms of the tone, the tenor, and if we get more clarity about what they're going to do with interest rates.
Well, let's head to Washington, D.C. for a check of the latest world and national news. Nancy Lyons is standing by. Hey there, Nance.